The millionaire falls into a coma, and a nobody takes care of his son. When he wakes up and finds out, he takes an unbelievable action. The heart monitor beeped in monotonous rhythm when Rafael Mendez opened his eyes for the first time in months. The fluorescent light in the hospital room blinded him momentarily, and his heavy eyelids struggled to stay open. His first word wasn't a request for water or a question about where he was. It was just a name, Miguel. The nurse, checking his vital signs, smiled gently, but her eyes revealed a hesitation that made Rafael's heart race. Where was his 5-year-old son? The last memories he had were of the accident, the heavy rain, the brakes failing, Miguel's high-pitched scream in the back seat. "Your son is fine, Mr. Mendez," the nurse quickly said, noticing his rising panic. "In fact, he's being very well cared for." That's when she mentioned a name Rafael had never heard before. Sara Oliveira. "Who?" His voice came out hoarse, unrecognizable even to himself. "The woman who's been taking care of Miguel all this time. She's been a true guardian angel." Rafael tried to sit up, ignoring the pain shooting through his body. A stranger was taking care of his son? How was that possible? Where was his family, the staff he maintained at his mansion? "I want to see my son," he demanded, his voice gaining strength with each word. "Now." The nurse nodded, but before she could leave the room, the door opened. A young woman entered, holding Miguel's hand. She had brown hair tied in a simple bun, wore modest but clean clothes, and her eyes had a depth Rafael couldn't quite decipher. But it was Miguel who captured his full attention. His son, who seemed to have grown years in just a few months, smiled the most radiant smile Rafael had ever seen. "Daddy!" Miguel ran toward him, stopping only when Sara gently held his shoulder. "Slowly, darling," she said softly. "Remember what we talked about. Your daddy still needs care." Rafael watched the interaction with a mix of gratitude and suspicion. Who was this woman who seemed to know his son better than he did? Rafael Mendez had always been known as the ruthless real estate mogul of São Paulo. At 35, he had built an empire from scratch, turning abandoned projects into luxury developments. His life had been a calculated string of successes until the death of his wife, Helena, during Miguel's birth 5 years ago. Since then, he had thrown himself obsessively into work, compensating for his absence with a team of staff to care for his son. Miguel had everything money could buy, except a father who was truly present. Now, 3 days after waking from the coma, Rafael was sitting in his hospital bed, listening to the social worker explain how Sara Oliveira came into their lives after the accident. "Your family tried to gain custody of Miguel," the social worker explained, "but your son was deeply traumatized. That's when Sara, who volunteered at the hospital, met Miguel." Rafael listened intently, his hands gripping the white bedsheet. "Miguel refused to speak to anyone," the social worker continued, "but something about Sara reached him. She spent hours reading stories to him, even when he pretended not to listen. One day, he just took her hand and didn't want to let go. Sarah's story was also revealed. A graduate in education, she worked on social projects and lived modestly in a small apartment. When Miguel's condition became critical, she offered to care for him temporarily. Her sister Amanda initially objected, the social worker said, but Miguel had terrible nightmares, and Sara was the only one who could calm him down. The judge granted temporary custody, considering the child's emotional well-being. Rafael closed his eyes, recalling the visible transformation in his son. Miguel, once a quiet and withdrawn child, now radiated joy. His laughter echoed through the hospital corridors during their visits. "Did she ask for any financial compensation?" Rafael asked, his voice betraying a mix of distrust and curiosity. The social worker shook her head. "In fact, she declined any financial help your family offered. Sara used her own savings to care for Miguel. She adjusted her work hours and turned her small apartment into a welcoming home for him." It was at that moment that Sarah gently knocked on the door, holding Miguel's hand. The boy carried a colorful drawing. "Look, Daddy, I drew our family," Miguel exclaimed, holding out the paper. 3 stick figures smiled, one tall representing Raphael, one smaller as Miguel, and a female figure with a big heart drawn beside her, Sarah. Raphael felt something break inside him. It wasn't jealousy or anger. It was the realization that while he had built empires of concrete, this stranger had built something far more precious, a real home for his son. A week later, Raphael was finally discharged from the hospital. The mansion in Morumbi, once a symbol of his success, now felt strangely empty and cold. Miguel, reluctant to leave Sarah's apartment, had only agreed to return home if she promised to visit regularly. "His room is different," Raphael noted, standing at the door of what had once been decorated with expensive superhero themes and imported toys. Now the walls bore colorful drawings. A small herb garden adorned the balcony, and a shelf of well-worn children's books stood nearby. A simple armchair with a handmade blanket marked the place where Sarah read stories to Miguel every night. "He chose every change," Sarah explained, having come to help with the transition. "We discovered Miguel has a special talent for taking care of plants, and he loves inventing his own stories." Raphael watched his son carefully watering the small herb pots. It was a scene so different from the memories he had, Miguel always quiet, playing alone with expensive video games. How did you do it?" Raphael asked, his voice low so Miguel wouldn't hear. Sarah adjusted the strap of her simple bag nervously. "It wasn't anything extraordinary. I just gave him what every child needs: time, attention, and genuine love." That night, when it was time for bed, Miguel had his first meltdown since returning home. "I want Sarah," he cried, clinging to the sheets. "She always reads The Little Prince the right way." Feeling completely lost, Raphael picked up the phone. It was almost 10 p.m. when Sarah arrived, still wearing her work clothes from the social project. "Sorry to bother you so late," Raphael murmured. "It's never a bother when it's about Miguel," she replied simply, heading to the boys' room. Raphael stood at the door, watching as Sarah sat in the armchair, Miguel automatically curling up in her lap. Her gentle voice filled the room with the adventures of the little prince, and for the first time, Raphael truly listened to the story. "Why do you cry sometimes when you look at the stars?" Miguel asked sleepily, quoting a line from the book. "Because sometimes we find treasures in the most unexpected places," Sarah replied, her eyes meeting Raphael's for a brief moment. After Miguel fell asleep, they went down to the kitchen in silence. Raphael watched as Sarah made chamomile tea with the ease of someone who knew the space well. "You turned my house into a home," he finally said, "and I don't even know how to thank you." "I didn't do it for thanks," Sarah replied, gently sliding a cup toward him. "I did it because your son needed someone, and well, I needed him too." The news of Raphael's return to the mansion quickly spread among São Paulo's high society. One Sunday morning, Amanda, his sister, showed up unannounced, her expensive heels echoing on the marble floor. "We need to talk about this," she declared, casting a pointed look at Sarah, who was playing with Miguel in the garden. Raphael watched from the window as his son laughed, trying to teach Sarah how to make grass stars. She, clumsy but enthusiastic, joined the game with genuine joy. "What a situation." "Amanda, please." "Raphael, this woman doesn't belong in our world. She was useful when you were out of commission, but now, what will people think?" Raphael felt a growing irritation. "People, since when does that matter more than my son's happiness?" "Be realistic," insisted Amanda. "She lives in a tiny apartment in Santana, works on social projects, and wears department store clothes. How can you trust Miguel's upbringing to someone like that?" At that moment, Miguel came running in, his cheeks flushed with joy. "Aunt Amanda, come see my garden. Sarah taught me how to plant." "Cherry tomatoes." Amanda forced a smile. "Sweetheart, how about we go to the mall? We can buy that new video game you wanted." "No, thank you," replied Miguel with disarming simplicity. Sarah said we're making homemade pizza today. I'm going to knead the dough myself. Raphael observed his sister's shocked expression. The Miguel from before would never have turned down an expensive gift. Later, after Amanda had left, visibly upset, Raphael found Sarah organizing the kitchen for the promised activity. My sister thinks you're not suitable for Miguel, he said directly. Sarah stopped what she was doing, her hands slightly trembling. And what do you think? I think I've never seen my son so happy, replied Raphael, stepping closer. I think you've taught me more about being a father in a few weeks than I've learned in 5 years. Raphael, Let me finish, he interrupted gently. When I woke up from the coma, I was prepared to hate whoever had been with my son. But you didn't just take care of him, you transformed him. And maybe you transformed me too. Sarah looked at him, her eyes soft with held-back tears. I'm afraid, she confessed. Afraid that one day you'll realize your sister is right, that I don't belong in this world. What world? The world of appearances and superficialities that I built, or the world of true love and simplicity that you've shown Miguel? Before Sarah could respond, Miguel burst into the kitchen carrying his child-sized apron. Can we start the pizza now? Sarah promised to teach me her family's secret recipe. Raphael smiled, grabbing an apron for himself. Can I join this class too? The following months brought changes no one could have predicted. Raphael, the businessman once obsessed with status, began to see the world through the simple and sincere lens that Sarah and Miguel had presented to him. One Saturday afternoon, he surprised everyone by showing up at the social project where Sarah worked, wearing jeans and a t-shirt, something unthinkable just months earlier. He brought Miguel and a proposal. I want to help, he announced to Sarah, who was organizing donated school supplies, not with money, but with time. Miguel told me you need tutoring in math. Sarah looked at him with a mixture of surprise and admiration. Rafael Mendez, the powerful tycoon, is going to give math lessons to underprivileged children. The same man who built an empire calculating numbers can surely teach multiplication, he said with a smile, a gesture that had now become more frequent. The transformations didn't stop there. The mansion, once a luxury showroom, came alive. The formal garden gave way to a community vegetable patch, where children from the social project learned about healthy eating. The video game room became a space for reading and storytelling. But not everything was perfect. São Paulo's high society buzzed with rumors. Rafael Mendez is being manipulated by a con artist, some said. He lost his mind after the coma, others whispered. The last straw came during a charity dinner where Rafael officially introduced Sarah as his girlfriend. Amanda, furious, confronted the couple. You're throwing away all our prestige, she accused. First, you turn our mansion into a community center. Now this? It was Miguel who responded, surprising everyone. Aunt Amanda, Sarah taught me that real prestige is making people happy, and Daddy has never been so happy. The silence that followed was deafening. Raphael looked at his son, then at Sarah, and finally at his sister. You know, Amanda, he said calmly, I spent years building an empire based on appearances. It took losing everything in an accident to find what really matters. Sarah gently squeezed his hand, her eyes misty. But you didn't lose everything, she whispered. You gained a new perspective. That night, on the way home, Raphael made an unexpected stop at the small apartment where Sarah and Miguel had lived during his coma. The place, though tiny compared to the mansion, radiated a warmth no expensive decor could replicate. This is where you saved us both, he said, observing Miguel's photos on the wall, books piled up, and plants by the windows. No, Sarah replied. This is where we saved each other. A year after Raphael's awakening, the Mendez mansion was unrecognizable, not because of furniture or decor, but because of the life that pulsed in every corner. The sound of laughter replaced the formal silence, and the aroma of homemade cakes took the place of artificial air fresheners. On a special Sunday afternoon, the garden was decorated with simple flowers and colorful ribbons. Miguel, now 6, ran from one side to the other, supervising the final preparations with comic seriousness. "The rings are safe with me, Daddy," he announced for the 10th time, showing the little cushion he carried. Raphael adjusted his tie, watching the arriving guests. They weren't São Paulo's elite. They were the children from the social project, volunteer teachers, and families who had become part of their lives over the past year. Amanda was there too, surprisingly, though still seeming out of place in her designer clothes. Sarah appeared in the garden, wearing a simple white lace dress and holding a bouquet of wildflowers. Her eyes met Raphael's, and in that moment all the world's doubts and prejudices seemed insignificant. During the ceremony, Miguel insisted on giving an unplanned speech. "When I was little," he began, drawing smiles. After all, he was still little. "I thought family was just Daddy and me. Then when Daddy slept for a long time in the hospital, I learned from Sarah that family is whoever makes our hearts smile. Now we're a big family, with lots of different people, and that's way better than just having expensive toys." Raphael's eyes welled up, and Sarah gently squeezed his hand. After the exchange of rings, Amanda approached the couple, visibly emotional. "Forgive me," she said, surprising everyone. "I was so worried about appearances that I didn't see the true wealth Sarah brought into our lives." The party that followed was a perfect reflection of the new life they had built. Children playing on the grass, adults chatting casually, cheerful music and homemade food. There was no protocol or formality, only genuine joy. At the end of the night, Raphael found Sarah and Miguel dozing in the old armchair in the bedroom, the little prince open on their laps. Watching the scene, he understood that true luxury didn't lie in the material possessions he had accumulated, but in sincere smiles, spontaneous hugs, and the unconditional love that was now part of his daily life. "You know," Sarah whispered sleepily, opening her eyes, "sometimes the greatest treasures are hidden in the most unlikely places, like a hospital volunteer who transformed the life of an arrogant millionaire and his son." Raphael didn't respond. "Or like a millionaire and his son who taught a simple woman that miracles happen every day," she added. Miguel stirred between them, smiling in his sleep. And in that moment, Raphael knew for sure his greatest fortune wasn't in his bank accounts or real estate ventures, but right there, in that old armchair, with his unlikely and perfectly imperfect family. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel, turn on the notification bell, and share this story of love and transformation with those you love. After all, as we learned from Raphael, Sarah, and Miguel, the true treasures of life are the connections we make and the people who transform our journey.